I always thought the word normal was a lie adults told themselves to sleep at night. From the outside, my life probably looked forgettable in that perfectly bland kind of way. A house in the suburbs of Carbondale, Illinois. A tired brick ranch with mint green shutters and a front porch that creaked when you breathed too hard. Dad worked long-haul freight, gone 4 nights a week. Mom ran the front desk at Dr. Patel's dental clinic. Though she secretly dreamed of being a travel blogger, she just never traveled. And me? Well, I was the ghost in room 12B. A 17-year-old junior, invisible in the hallways, forgettable in class, unremarkable in sports, and maybe a little weird if you asked the kids who pretended not to know me. My name, or at least the one printed on attendance sheets, was Mason. But I didn't feel like a Mason. I wasn't sure who I felt like, honestly. But it wasn't him. The weird thing is, I was never trying to be different. I wasn't loud. I didn't dress strange. I didn't ask for attention. I just didn't fit, not into my own skin, not into my life, not even in my own reflection. My favorite part of the day, and this is going to sound pathetic, was when the hallway light near the laundry room flickered. It always threw the soft, crooked shadow that stretched from the banister to the mirror hanging in the den. If I angled it just right, stood in that triangle of light, and looked quickly, just quickly enough, I could pretend the silhouette staring back wasn't Mason. I know that sounds crazy, but there was something softer in the outline. Something gentler. I would trace that reflection with my eyes, like it was some alternate version of me in another world. One I couldn't quite reach. That's how things started. Not with a bang. Not with a confession. Just with shadows and mirrors. One night, a Thursday I think, Mom was working late and Dad was still somewhere between Boise and Denver. I stood in front of the mirror again, lit by that tired hallway bulb. I held up one of her old cardigans. Soft beige wool with tiny pearl buttons. It still smelled like lavender and faint coffee. I wasn't really doing anything, just holding it up, draping it over my shoulders. But then something happened. I caught myself in the mirror. And I didn't look away. I slipped one arm through the sleeve. Then the other. It hung loosely, almost like a shawl, but something about it made the reflection different. Closer to the version I always hoped to see. That was the moment I heard her voice. You always stare at yourself like you're in love. I jumped 3 feet out of my own soul. It was Aubrey, my neighbor, best friend, and unfortunately, the most observant person on earth. She stood in the doorway with a takeout bag in one hand and a milkshake in the other. Her parents worked graveyard shifts, and she practically lived at our place. We'd grown up riding bikes, swapping comic books, watching late-night movie marathons, but nothing could have prepared me for her catching me mid-cardigan. Aubrey, I gasped, yanking the sweater off. She just raised an eyebrow. Didn't say stop. I wasn't. It's not what you... Mason. She took a sip of her milkshake. You don't have to explain anything. Seriously, my ears burned. My lungs felt like I forgot how to use them. But she just stepped forward, set the bag on the table, and said something that shattered my panic into 1,000 pieces. You looked happy. I didn't know what to say. Maybe I was happy. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't hiding from myself in the mirror. She sat down cross-legged on the carpet and patted the spot beside her. Come here. I sat. Hesitantly. She opened the takeout, 2 orders of pad thai and a container of fried tofu puffs, my weird favorite. Do you feel better like that? She asked, her voice careful, but not weird. I don't know. It's not like I want to be a girl. The words tasted incomplete even as I said them. She didn't press. Just nodded. Okay, but maybe it's not about labels. Maybe it's about comfort. About honesty. The silence between us was heavy, but not suffocating. She took a tofu puff and nudged one toward me. You know what? She said. You don't have to figure it all out tonight. But if it ever feels like you're drowning in someone else's life, maybe it's time to swim toward the one that actually fits. I gave a small laugh. That was either poetic or deeply weird. She grinned. Both. You're welcome. That night I stared at the ceiling for hours. Something had cracked open. I didn't know what was on the other side of that crack. A different name? A different wardrobe? A different me? But I did know this. The girl in the mirror might not be real yet. But she was waiting for me. I thought things would go back to normal. That's what people always say, right? You have a weird, vulnerable moment, maybe say something you didn't mean to say, and then the next day, you pretend it never happened. But when I woke up the next morning, the sweater I'd worn in front of the mirror was still folded neatly at the foot of my bed. I didn't remember doing that. The sleeves were tucked in with care. Like a quiet offering, like a reminder from someone, maybe a future version of me, that the person I was pretending not to be was still waiting. Aubrey didn't bring it up. Not during first period chemistry when she passed me a pack of gum with the words "calm down, you dork" scribbled on a sticky note. Not during lunch when she stole half my sandwich and complained the cafeteria only served bread sadness. Not even when we walked home and she dared me to hop fences the whole way. But when we reached my porch, she paused. "So," she said, shifting her backpack. "I ordered something. For you." I blinked. For me. Technically from me. But for whoever you need it to be. Before I could ask what that meant, she pulled a small brown envelope from her bag. It looked like it had come from one of those indie craft shops she always browsed. "What is it?" "Something small," she said. "Try it on later. If it feels right, keep it." She shoved it into my hands before I could argue and skipped down the steps. "And Mason," she called, "don't overthink it. You'll ruin the magic." My hands shook a little when I opened the envelope. Inside was a necklace. Simple. Silver chain. A tiny charm in the shape of a crescent moon. On the back, engraved in looping cursive. "You were never a phase." I don't know why, but I cried. I sat on my bed for a long time, just turning it over in my hands. Then, slowly, I put it on. I looked at myself in the mirror again. Not hiding, not squinting, just looking. It didn't change anything. Not really. But it didn't have to. It was enough that I looked and saw her. Things didn't get easier overnight. That would have been too easy. Reality doesn't hand out do-overs like free samples. At school, everything still felt gray. I was still Mason, the half-present student with the quiet voice and even quieter confidence. Teachers marked me here, but it felt more like fading. At home, Dad's trips got longer. He came back smelling like cheap motel coffee and talked less with each visit. He didn't notice the necklace. Or maybe he did, and he just didn't ask. Mom was different. She noticed. On a Sunday morning, I came into the kitchen wearing it, mostly out of habit. She blinked once, looked at me for a second longer than usual, then went back to pouring orange juice. "Pretty," she said. "That's it." That's all she said. But it felt like a door quietly unlocking. Later that night, Aubrey messaged me. "Aubrey, you wore it today, didn't you?" Me, "Yeah." Aubrey, "And?" Me, "It felt like me. Like I was allowed to be me." Aubrey, "You are." She followed it with a meme of a raccoon wearing lipstick. It was awful and perfect. I started borrowing more time for myself. Not clothing. Not yet. Just space. Like turning on music that made me feel alive, synth pop and slow indie ballads where people whispered truths into microphones. Or sketching outfits in the margins of my notebooks, not because I wanted to be a designer, but because I wanted to imagine myself in something that made sense. Aubrey noticed. She always did. "You should come to Thrift Haven with me," she said one Friday. "Just to look." I can't buy anything. Who said anything about buying? We took her mom's hand-me-down Civic and drove 3 towns over. No one from school would see us there. Thrift Haven smelled like old pine, dollar candles, and denim. But it was quiet. Comfortable. There was no pressure. She guided me to a rack of cardigans and gently nudged my arm. "Find one that doesn't feel like armor." I did. A deep plum one. Slightly oversized with pearl buttons and embroidered leaves on the cuffs. It looked soft. like something I could disappear into and still feel visible. Back at my house, she made me promise not to overthink it. So I didn't. I stood in front of the mirror, cardigan buttoned, moon necklace resting against my chest. And I smiled. A real smile. Not a mask. That night, she asked the question I'd been avoiding. If you could be anyone, what name would feel like yours? I hesitated, then answered quietly. Skylar. She nodded like she'd known it all along. Well then, Skylar, she said, offering me her pinky. It's nice to finally meet you. The first time someone called me Skylar out loud, outside of my bedroom, I flinched. We were in the aisles of a small art supply store Aubrey loved, the kind that had handmade sketchbooks, watercolor pens that cost too much, and clerks who wore beanies even in summer. I was holding a box of soft pastels, just kind of running my thumb along the edge, when she said it. Skylar, that color looks good on you. It came out so easily. No pause. No wink. Like she'd always known me that way. I didn't respond right away. My throat tightened. She turned and saw my expression. Too much? She asked gently. No, I whispered. It's perfect. Because it was. It just didn't feel like mine yet. Not out loud. Not in public. Not with other people around. But that night, when I was brushing my teeth, I tried saying it to my reflection. Skylar. Then again, softer. Skylar. I waited for something to shift. For something to snap. For some voice in my head to say, what are you doing? You're just pretending. But it didn't come. The voice that answered was silent. Calm. For the first time in a long while, my reflection didn't argue back. A week passed. Then another. Life moved in soft, uncertain steps. There were no huge declarations. No glittering transformations. Just little things. I wore the cardigan twice under my school hoodie. No one noticed, but I did. I joined a digital art forum under a new username at Skyink. I even picked a profile picture that was vague, but somehow more me than the photo on my student ID. And I started writing again, not essays, not homework, but small, honest things. A scene where a girl wakes up in a world where mirrors reflect her truth instead of her past. A letter written from oneself to another, across time. A list of things I wanted to say to my future self. Number 5 was, if you're reading this and you're still afraid, that's okay. But please don't stop walking forward. Then came the sleepover. Aubrey invited me, casually, like she was offering gum. My mom's working the night shift. Come over. We'll watch bad horror movies, eat cereal at 2 a.m., and regret our life choices. Won't it be weird? Only if you wear socks with sandals again. I agreed. She gave me a look when I showed up in my usual faded jeans and zip-up jacket. You're still hiding, she said, not unkindly. I looked down. You brought it, right? She asked. I nodded. The cardigan and necklace were in my backpack, wrapped like sacred treasure. Well, Skylar, she said, pushing the door open. Come in as yourself this time. Inside, her room smelled like incense and lemon-scented lotion. Fairy lights blinked around the walls. A poster of Janelle Monáe winked at me from above her dresser. Aubrey handed me a change of clothes, soft lounge pants and a lavender tank top. She shrugged when I hesitated. They're mine, but you're welcome to borrow them. I think they'll suit you better. I changed in the bathroom. My fingers trembled as I slipped the tank top over my head and pulled the cardigan over it. Then I clipped the necklace on. Skylar looked back at me in the mirror. Still quiet. Still unsure. But she was there. That night, after 2.5 horror movies, half a box of Fruit Loops, and hours of laughing until my face hurt, we ended up sitting on the floor, legs crossed, the room lit only by string lights and the dull blue glow of her lava lamp. I think I'm scared, I admitted. Aubrey leaned her head on my shoulder. Of what? That if I really become her, if I really become Skylar, people will stop seeing me. You don't want to disappear? I already did once, I said. When I was just Mason. Nobody saw me. But at least I knew the rules. If I let go of that, who do I become? She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You don't disappear, Skylar. You unfold." We fell asleep like that, side by side, fully clothed, her arm resting across mine. When I woke up, the sun was soft on my face and my mascara had smudged a little. She nudged me with a bowl of cereal. "You drool like a cartoon character," she said. I laughed, and for a moment, I forgot the weight in my chest. But the world doesn't let you stay in safe spaces for long. Back at school that Monday, the cardigan stayed in my bag. Not because I didn't want to wear it, but because of what I heard in the hallway. A group of juniors, pushing past each other near the lockers, were mocking someone. I didn't catch the name, but the words hit hard. Dude was wearing a skirt. Said it's not a big deal. Freakin' fairy. They laughed. Loud. Cruel. One of them slapped another's backpack and said, "Better not catch that disease, man." I walked faster. Shoulders hunched. And the cardigan stayed in my bag all week. Aubrey noticed. Of course she did. "Everything okay?" she asked by Wednesday. I nodded too fast. She narrowed her eyes. "You're folding inward again." I don't want to make things harder. She crossed her arms. "You being you isn't making things harder. Their ignorance is. But I don't want to get hurt." "Neither do I," she said. "But you can't protect a butterfly by keeping it in the cocoon forever. That's not safety. That's silence." That night, I went home and took out a notebook. On the first page, I wrote, "Skylar is not a phase. She's not an act. She's the version of me I fought to find." By Friday, my stomach ached just walking into the school building. The halls weren't any louder than usual. The faces weren't any meaner. But every word I heard, every glance that lingered a little too long, felt like a secret weapon. Maybe they knew. Maybe I looked too soft, too quiet. Maybe Skylar was showing through the cracks in Mason. And part of me wanted her to, but another part, the bigger, louder part, begged her to stay hidden. Then something unexpected happened. Second period, English class. Mrs. Daniels had just handed out an essay assignment titled Becoming, a Story of Change. I froze. Becoming? I stared at the title like it was a dare. I barely heard her explain the format. First person, honest, at least 3 pages. The class groaned. I didn't. It was like someone had cracked open the door, just a little. Like the universe was testing me. That night, I sat at my desk for hours. Pen hovering. Then I started to write. Not about Skylar, not explicitly. I wasn't ready for that. But I wrote about a kid who wore a costume every day. One made of expectations, of silence, of stiff shoulders and fake laughs. A kid who learned to unzip it, little by little, until they saw someone new in the mirror. I called the story The Girl Between the Lines. I printed it the next morning and turned it in without making eye contact. By Monday afternoon, I had a note on my paper in red ink. This was beautiful. Quietly powerful. Can I read it aloud, anonymously? I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. But Mrs. Daniels read it anyway. And the classroom fell completely, uncomfortably silent as she did. By the time she reached the final paragraph, I wasn't looking at anyone. Just my notebook. But when she said, and maybe the costume was never who they were, just the armor they wore until they were brave enough to walk out in sunlight, I heard someone suck in a breath. Then, a single clap. Then another. Then the bell. Nobody knew who wrote it. But I walked out that day a little straighter. Like I'd slipped off a layer of skin I didn't need anymore. 2 weeks later, the weirdest thing happened. In the middle of a random Tuesday, our vice principal called me into her office. "Nothing's wrong," she said quickly, seeing the panic in my eyes. "This is actually good. You've been recommended for a district-wide writing scholarship." "What?" I blinked. "Your English teacher submitted your essay. The anonymous one." The board was impressed. My heart pounded. She smiled, pushing a form toward me. "If you want to move forward, just fill this out. We'll need your name attached." I stared at the paper. Name. I hesitated, not because I didn't want it, but because for the first time, I wasn't sure which name to write. Mason? Skylar? Or something else in between. That night, I sat in the dark with my laptop, staring at the cursor on a blank Google Doc. Then I typed, I don't think names are just labels. I think they're doors. And some of us spend our lives trying to find the right key. Aubrey and I walked home together the next day. You seem different, she said. But in a good way. Like you've stopped holding your breath. Maybe I have. She waited. You going to tell me what changed? I told her about the scholarship. About the form. About the name. She stopped in her tracks. What did you write? I took a breath. Skylar. I wrote Skylar. Her smile was small, but proud. Then I guess the real story's just beginning. The next morning, I pulled on the cardigan. Not under my hoodie this time. Over a soft, ash-colored tee. I clipped on the necklace. And, for the first time, I walked into school not afraid of being seen. People stared. Some whispered. But no one said anything cruel. Not that day. Not to my face. And for the first time, that silence didn't feel like hiding, it felt like space. Space to become who I already was. In the cafeteria that day, a girl I barely knew from bio class slid onto the bench across from me. You're brave, she said. I blinked. She shrugged. Just wanted to say it. Not a lot of people are. I didn't know what to say. Thanks, I finally murmured. She gave me a thumbs up, then returned to her group. I watched her go, the weight in my chest lifting an inch. Aubrey passed by moments later, smirking. Fan club forming already? I rolled my eyes. Shut up. Make me, Sky. I blushed at the nickname. Not because it embarrassed me, but because it felt real. Like I was being claimed by the life I wanted. And I wanted it so badly. Later that week, I got an email. Subject: Scholarship Finalist. Congratulations. You've been selected as one of 3 finalists to read your work at the State Student Showcase in Austin. My hands shook. I reread it 3 times. Then I did something wild. I printed it out, walked to my mom's room, and handed it to her without saying a word. She read it in silence. When she finished, she looked up. You wrote something that mattered. I guess I did. Then you deserve to be heard. She didn't ask about the name on the form. She didn't have to. But as I turned to leave, she said softly, Skylar. I froze. Yeah, I'm proud of you. Austin was 3 hours away. 3 hours of my mother gripping the steering wheel tighter than usual. 3 hours of me staring out the window, clutching the printed copy of my essay with fingers that wouldn't stop trembling. I wasn't just going to read my words in front of strangers. I was going to introduce myself as Skylar, out loud, in a microphone, in a room full of people who didn't know Mason ever existed. I'm not ready, I mumbled around mile 95. My mom glanced at me. You're more ready than you think. I didn't believe her. But I didn't say so. The venue was a giant high school auditorium, red velvet seats, a stage with a podium, the kind of place where big things happen to other people. I sat backstage with the other finalists, a girl named Jamila who wore a power suit better than any adult I'd ever seen, and a boy named Theo who had already won 2 regional writing awards and couldn't stop tapping his pen against his clipboard. They looked composed. I felt like a balloon about to burst. Skylar, someone called from the wings. My legs wouldn't move. Then I felt a hand brush mine. My mom. She didn't say anything, just squeezed gently, then let go. I took 1 step, then another. The lights were blinding. The podium too tall. I adjusted the mic with shaking fingers and looked out at a sea of shadowy faces. I could back out. I could walk away and no one would blame me. But then I thought about that girl from bio class, and Aubrey, and the moment I wrote Skylar on the form. So I leaned forward and began. When I was a kid, I thought mirrors were liars. They showed you skin and eyes and hair, but they didn't show you truth. They couldn't show the parts of you that don't have names yet, only feelings. Only hopes. This story is about the day I looked in the mirror and recognized myself for the very first time. I don't remember much after that. Only that when I finished, there was a silence. Then applause. Not thunderous. Not standing ovation. But real. And kind. After the showcase, a few people came up to talk to me. One teacher from a rural school said, "I have a student like you. Thank you for this." A boy about my age whispered, "I'm not out. But you made me feel like maybe I could be." It was the first time I realized this story wasn't just mine anymore. And that scared me, but it also made me feel powerful. That night at the hotel, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror after my shower. I had no makeup on, no wig, just a towel and damp hair. And for the first time in forever, I didn't hate what I saw. Not because I looked like the girl I wanted to be, but because I was her in the ways that mattered. Monday morning, school looked exactly the same. But I didn't. I wore a soft blue blouse I had picked out with my mom. Not too bold. Not flashy. But definitely not Mason's. People noticed. I could feel it in the way heads turned. Some snickered. Some stared. But nobody said a word. Until gym class. Coach Wrigley barked, "Mason, you're late." I froze in place. Coach glanced down at his clipboard. "Sorry, Skylar." "Right. Come on." That single moment sent a wave of whispers through the locker room. But oddly, it felt like armor. Because now they knew. And I wasn't going to shrink from it. That afternoon, I found a note slipped into my locker. Just 3 words. "You go, girl." No signature. But it didn't matter. For the rest of the day, I couldn't stop smiling. The next week brought challenges I didn't expect. Some teachers struggled with my name. A few students weren't so subtle with their side comments. But I had allies now. Aubrey made sure to walk beside me whenever she could. Mrs. Daniels always referred to me as Ms. Schuyler with a proud twinkle in her eye. And my mom, well, she started reading books about gender identity and left them on the kitchen counter like casual conversation starters. I think it was her way of saying, "I'm learning with you." One night, over dinner, she asked, "Have you thought about changing things legally? Your name, I mean." I nearly dropped my fork. Yeah, but I didn't think we could. She smiled. "There's paperwork. And it's annoying. But we can figure it out." I didn't cry. Not right then. But I excused myself to my room and held the pillow to my chest for a long time. Because that was the moment I realized she wasn't just supporting me. She was standing beside me. The final moment that sealed it was at the end of the quarter when the school published the honor roll. Under top essay submission, next to the gold medal icon was one name. Skylar Rose Bennett. Not Mason. Skylar. Skylar Rose. The girl who used to only exist in mirrors and midnight thoughts. Now in print. Now in ink. Now in reality. And, for the first time, I felt permanent. Like maybe I wasn't fading into who I was supposed to be. Maybe I was finally stepping into her. The name change hearing was set for a Friday morning in late April. Spring had crept in, golden pollen dusting every surface, birds yelling their joy into the mornings, but I couldn't stop shaking. Not from the cold. From the weight of it all. It wasn't just paperwork. It was the closing ceremony for the life I used to fake. And I wasn't sure if I was ready to bury Mason, even if I didn't want to live as him anymore. The night before, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror. Again. This time, I wasn't searching for flaws. I wasn't seeing if Skylar looked real enough. I was just staring. Staring at someone I had grown to like. My fingers ran across the counter, brushing against the brush set my mom got me for Christmas. I ran one through my hair, now shoulder length, after I stopped cutting it short every month like I used to. "Who are you without the mirror?" I whispered. There was no answer. But I knew I wasn't Mason anymore. At the courthouse, everything looked gray and serious. Wooden walls. Stone-faced clerks. A metal detector that beeped at my heels and made the deputy glare until I lifted my pants leg to show him the tiny pin on my sock. It said, "She/her." He blinked once and waved me through. My mom whispered, "You okay?" I lied and nodded. We sat in the back row until my name was called. I walked up slowly, feeling the air press down like I was underwater. The judge was a woman with kind eyes and silver hair in a tight bun. She looked over her glasses at me. "Petitioner Mason Bennett, here seeking a legal name change to Skylar Rose Bennett." "Correct." I swallowed hard. "Yes, Your Honor." "Do you swear that this is not for any fraudulent purpose and that this change reflects your authentic identity?" "I do." She leaned back, folded her hands, and said something I didn't expect. "You know, when I was your age, I didn't know anyone brave enough to live as themselves. I'm glad to see the world's changing." My chest tightened. In a good way. Then she smiled. Petition approved. That was it. No balloons. No confetti. Just a bang of a gavel and a legal rebirth. But to me, it felt like lightning. On the drive home, I stared at the new court order in my lap. My mom glanced at me at a red light. "Do you feel different?" she asked. I feel like I finally started breathing, but the name change wasn't the finish line. It was the first checkpoint. Because while school legally had to update their records, the student body was a different story. Brandon Hart, varsity baseball and resident loudmouth, was the first to say something out loud in the hallway. "Yo, Bennett, wait, it's Skylar now, right?" Skylar. He said it like a joke, like he was trying it on for size. I didn't stop walking, didn't blink. But Aubrey spun on her heel. "You got something to say that's not tired and pathetic, Brandon?" He laughed, but it cracked. After that, it got quieter. Not better. Just more subtle. Some girls stopped inviting me to things. Study groups I used to be part of got rescheduled, without me. Mrs. Hollis, the history teacher with a Jesus fish tattoo, started calling on me less and marked down my presentation for being distracting. But the worst part? My dad hadn't called. Not once since Mom told him about the name change. "You think he's gonna just ignore it forever?" I asked one night. My mom shrugged without looking up from her tea. "He's got a choice to make." I hated that. Because I had made my choice. Why couldn't he? The biggest surprise came from my little cousin, Ella. She was 7. Sticky fingers and all. We were at a family barbecue a few weekends after the name change. I'd worn a sundress and denim jacket, soft but not too flashy. Most of the adults were polite but stiff. Ella marched right up to me with barbecue sauce on her chin and asked, "Are you a girl now?" I braced, but I nodded. "Yeah, I am." She looked at me like I'd said I was moving to the moon. Then, "Cool. Can you braid my hair like yours?" That was the moment I knew I couldn't go back. Because I didn't want to. Not when even the smallest, messiest person in my life could understand what grown adults refuse to. That Monday, I found another note in my locker. "They see you now. Keep shining." Still no signature. But now I didn't need to know. Because I was learning how to see myself. And that was worth more than any name someone else gave me. It was the little things that started to shift first. The hallway glances that used to linger a beat too long, some of them turned into nods. The guidance counselor, Mrs. Patel, started asking if I wanted to update my file photo, said they'd cover the cost. Even the lunch lady stopped calling me sweetie in that confused way, like she wasn't sure if I still counted. But none of that compared to the bathroom. Bathrooms became a kind of battleground. There were 2 unspoken rules in school. Don't make a scene. Don't break the social contract in the bathroom. I didn't mean to become a test case, but the moment I stepped into the girls' restroom one Thursday, the air snapped like a trap. 2 girls I'd never really spoken to, Kendra and Layla, stopped talking mid-sentence. One clutched her bag tighter. The other just stared. I kept my eyes low, went into the stall, locked it. The silence burned louder than any scream. I waited, listened to their whispers. Layla said, "She doesn't even have the right you know. And then they left. That night I cried for the first time in weeks. Not because I regretted anything, but because I felt like every step forward was just far enough to see the next wall. I texted Aubrey, "I don't belong anywhere." She replied within seconds, "You belong with me. Tomorrow after school. My house. Come hungry. Bring your hoodie." Friday was different. Aubrey met me in the parking lot, already holding out a pumpkin spice latte like it was a peace offering. I didn't know I was in a war, but the gesture mattered. We rode to her house listening to Maggie Rogers and sharing fries. Her house smelled like vanilla and cumin. Her mom waved, said hi Skylar, and went back to a call like it was no big deal. Like I was no big deal. That felt enormous. Aubrey sat cross-legged on her bed, pulling out a giant binder from under her mattress. "Okay," she said, "we're going to build your real life now." I blinked. "What?" "This," she said, slapping the cover. "Operation Skylar 2.0. The binder had dividers. Each tab had a name. Voice training, makeup hacks, confidence challenges, clothes that slay. Yes, with 3 asterisks. "You made all this?" She smiled. "Of course. You think I was gonna let my best friend learn everything from TikTok disasters?" I laughed. For the first time in days. We spent hours practicing everything. She had me say phrases into a voice app, tweaking pitch and tone like a music producer. She showed me how to line my lips to make them fuller. She even timed how long I could hold a neutral stare in a mirror without flinching. "You're learning to see yourself," she whispered once. That's power. When I left that night, my face still tingled from a cucumber peel-off mask, and I couldn't stop smiling. She'd given me more than tips. She'd given me back my hope. Monday came with a different challenge. Mr. Castell, the gym teacher, called me into his office after class. He folded his arms. "I got your updated file from the office." I nodded. He sighed. "Listen, the locker rooms aren't set up for, situations like yours." "Like what?" I asked. He cleared his throat. "You know, I just don't want anyone feeling uncomfortable." I stood there, heart pounding. Then I said, "You mean me being uncomfortable, right?" He blinked. "I've been here the whole year. Nothing's happened. No one's complained. But now I change my name and suddenly it's a situation." He looked like he didn't know whether to argue or apologize. In the end, he said nothing. But 2 days later, the school counselor emailed me and offered access to the nurse's private bathroom until a better solution could be worked out. Small win. But it tasted like justice. That same week, I got a letter in my locker. A real, folded paper, handwritten letter. "You don't know me, but I just wanted to say thank you. Watching you walk into class every day with your head up makes me feel braver. I'm not out yet. Maybe I never will be. But seeing you're proof that maybe we survive." It wasn't signed. But I read it 5 times before I tucked it into the front of my binder, right behind the Confidence Challenges tab. That was the night I told myself something. Being visible isn't just about me anymore. I had become the mirror, and someone else had finally seen themselves in me.